Welcome to the Laughter Clinic podcast with comedian and suicidologist Mark McConville, bringing you practical, evidence-based self-care strategies, the latest research in mental health, along with conversations that inspire, educate, and entertain. This is the Laughter Clinic podcast with your host, Mark McConville.
Welcome back to the Laughter Clinic podcast, my friends, wherever you are listening in the world. I hope that you are healthy and happy and everything is good for you. So always appreciate your time in joining us. And as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I went and attended the Moral Injury Conference, the first ever Moral Injury Conference down in Tasmania last week. And joining me at that conference was lead facilitator in trauma recovery, Jodi Allen, who you would know from previous podcasts. We did the Life Skills Masterclass series together, and Jodi's got her own standalone episode. So please welcome Jodi Allen to the Laughter Clinic podcast again. How you going, Jodi?
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome.
Always love a chat with you.
Great. And so it was really interesting going to that conference to see the fact that it was interesting going to something that was the first time it had ever been done, wasn't it? Like it was very cool. I thought it was very cool.
It felt very groundbreaking and quite a privilege to be there, actually.
So let's talk about, for those people that may not have listen to previous episodes. If you want a really deep episode on moral injury, there's one that I did last year with Dr. Nikki Jameson, so you could look that up. Nikki was actually one of the main keynote speakers at the conference last week, and she heads up Moral Injury Australia. It's a burgeoning field, isn't it? Like it's a field of study, and so let's talk about. Firstly, the fact that there was 300 people there at the first ever conference.
Yeah, that was great.
Wasn't it?
Such an interesting demographic of people that were there and their backgrounds, researchers, clinicians, from government, from Veterans Affairs. It was a very interesting a group of people in the room, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really cool to see people in uniform, senior members of, defence and police in uniform there. I thought was very cool.
And internationally as well. We had New Zealand Defence Force there. We had clinicians from South Korea. Remember that were sitting behind us?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So it was a great gathering of interesting minds.
And it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge the hard work that Paula Leishman put in, and because I know that she was a big driving force for making that conference actually happen, and the committee. So yes, just want to acknowledge them and all the hard work they put in, because I think for the first conference they nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Venue was good, content was good, selection of speakers, the way that the days were mapped out. Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about moral injury for our friends that may be listening that go, what conference are they talking about? Where did they go? Was this a junket? No, it wasn't a junket. It was we were working. So let's talk about because there was a lot of talk about the definition of moral injury, wasn't there, at the conference?
Yeah, there is still a lot of conversation around what is moral injury and how do we identify it and how do we separate it from the moral distress that we will often experience in living. And so I've got here, so on the first day there was, as you recall, there was a lot of conversation, and nearly every presentation started off with what is moral injury, and then by the second day, all the presenters we're just going to skip through the first couple of slides because we all now know by the second day what moral injury is. But it was really good to have the first day of having everyone's a lot of the researchers and that around discussing what is moral injury. And I've got here what the ADF, the Australian Defence Force's definition of moral injury is. And I'm just going to read that out.
You go.
So ADF's definition: moral injury is a trauma-related syndrome caused by the physical, psychological, social, and spiritual impact of grievous moral transgressions. Sorry, I dictated this. It should be just transgression.
Transgressions, yeah.
I should have edited this.
What is a moral transaction? That's what I want to know. I want to know where you go with that. Okay, it's a transgression.
Transgression, sorry. Or violations of an individual's deeply held moral beliefs and or ethical standards due to an individual perpetrating or failing to prevent, bearing witness, or about inhumane acts which result in the pain, suffering, or death of others, and which fundamentally challenges the moral integrity of an individual, organization, or community, and all the subsequent experiences and feelings of utter betrayal of what is right, caused by trusted individuals who hold legitimate authority. So that might be a little bit of a word salad, but it's...
Well, the flow on from that is, when a lot of the presenters identified what were potentially events in your life that would bring about moral injury, and a lot of it is brought down to three kind of categories, whether it's a something from yourself, a feeling betrayed by an organisation or others, and then something like you're witnessing an immoral act or witnessing excessive violence or death or something like that. And a lot of the self stuff I find was interesting about doing something against your moral values or being able to not being able to stop something happening that you can see is morally wrong.
And two words I recall are acts of commission, which is perhaps you've caused harm, or especially in the Defence Force, the taking of human life, the act of killing.
Yeah.
And omission is, and we had a lived experience speaker there from the New Zealand Army about a mission that he could not save a colleague's life on a deployment in conflict. And that was that moral injury for him that he kept, and then now as a big part of his research was that he was unable to save a life. So there's that moral quandary on both sides. And I did read the paper, the review from Phoenix, Australia, who do some amazing research in this space back in 2022. And they had a question in their paper that a common question: isn't this definition pathologizing the normal human experience of moral emotions? And their response is no. The definition of moral injury, it's important distinction between moral distress, which is normal and serves as an adaptive function for society. Moral injury goes beyond the experience of distressing moral emotions. It is pervasive and enduring, and its impact across psychosocial and spiritual domains and associated with functional impact or impairment. So thus, moral emotions are not inherently problematic, but moral injury is.
Oh yeah, and that's
Yeah.
it's so broad in relation to the scope of what it looks like for different people, because obviously the sense of depression, anxiety, anger. A lot of the time, there's anger involved. Like you said, social problems, relationship issues, but that sense of betrayal is the one that keeps coming up for me. Like that was what was mentioned so much at the conference, betrayal, feelings of guilt, shame, loss of trust in relation to the organisation that, they hoped had their back, and a lot of the time they haven't. And then that can lead to, unfortunately, that can lead to self-harm and suicide ultimately. So it's so interesting there was, like you said, on day one, everyone was talking about the definition. Let's talk about the definitions. And you're right. Even by the end of day one, you had people bringing up their slides and going, okay, so we've covered that.
Skip that.
But what was really interesting for me was, and Nikki talked about this in her podcast episode as well, is the differences. There's a lot of conversation around the differences between PTSD and moral injury, like the distinct differences, and then where the two overlap, like PTSD is, we're talking about here resulting from, like a threat to their actual life or their safety, trauma-based fear response, the whole world isn't safe, that heightened sense of awareness that they
Hypervigilance.
Hypervigilance, fear, anxiety, and hyperarousal. Which, if you didn't know, if you weren't talking about mental health, you'd go, "What is hyperarousal?" That sounds a little bit. How do I get on a bit of that? But we're actually talking about hyperarousal in a negative way here. And then moral injury is in the violation of the values. As opposed to the threat to your physical safety. We're talking about your deep-seated moral identity. What is your what is it that makes up your identity, and what is your belief structure? Like, even if you don't have a spiritual belief, right? And this was another thing that I wanted to chat about was I wasn't expecting there to be so many chaplains there, to be honest. And hearing from so many chaplains. And it's interesting that even if you don't have, you're not a religious person or you're not a spiritual person in some way, that doesn't mean that you're not going to, you're immune from moral injury, because we all have a sense of what's right and wrong in our own makeup. It's who we are. It makes us who we are.
Yeah. And when I was looking deep into some of the research and why there is such a focus on the religious aspect and chaplaincy, and is because often in moral injury, if you do have faith, they have noticed that a lot of people experience moral injury. There is that conflict around the lack of self-compassion or the judgment or the guilt towards self if they have the act of commission, perhaps have committed something that's against their values, and they feel then like, I'm a bad person, perhaps God will no longer be on my side, or there's this loss of faith that can lead to significant mental health issues, depression, the guilt and the shame. So it's that connecting back again with faith and with forgiveness that shows a really powerful part of healing.
Well, talking about the healing, that's a wonderful segue. Well done into talking about the treatment protocols, and this was something that obviously once we get once we got over everyone understanding the definition, and so everyone in the room was on the same page, it was nice how the conference kind of progressed in relation to, okay, let's get everyone on the same page with understanding what moral injury is, what it looks like, what are the differences and similarities and overlaps with PTSD, and, identification. And then it went into all the different treatment protocols and that sort of stuff. And it was really interesting. Like, you're doing your master's in counselling at the moment, and I was fascinated by the fact that when everyone kept meeting adaptive disclosure therapy, you were like, hang on a minute.
What is that?
Yeah.
I think before we get into treatment, if we just want to, because a few people after the conference that I met with, especially veterans, like, is it a diagnosis? Do you get diagnosed with moral injury? And I think before we go into treatment, if we just have a little bit of a chat about, there was discussion around, so moral injury is not a formal medical diagnosis in the traditional sense like PTSD is. But remember, there was discussion around how it has been added to the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, under a supplementary code. Remember that Z code?
The Z code, which is a holding place for it.
Holding place.
Yeah.
So they are encouraging people now to, mental health clinicians, specifically psychologists and psychiatrists, to recognize moral injury on a spectrum.
Yeah.
So we just talked about everyone will probably experience a moral dilemma in their life, but how do we recognize when it has become a moral injury and it is impacting a person's quality of life?
Yeah.
And so there are a couple of forms that clinicians can now use and lots of questions, and looking for what they call the PMIE, which is a potentially morally injurious event.
Yeah.
And so they'll recognize that. So through discussion, and this is also something that military members can do with their chaplain, is to discuss where there's this disclosure, which will lead into adaptive disclosure, is unpacking the event, that morally injurious. I'm not even sure if I'm saying
it. No, you got it. You're nailing it. You're nailing it. It's all good. Yeah.
The event, because often when even just that initial discussion around the event in a safe space, which is what adaptive disclosure therapy, which was developed by the United States Department of Veteran Affairs specifically for military personnel and veterans. And it uses this safe disclosure, be it to a mental health professional or a chaplain, and it helps to connect the individual back with their values and meaning making, and it uses mindfulness and ways of taking action to help make repair with self and repair with others. So in that adaptive disclosure, there was another lived experience presentation where a service member with a chaplain was actually, no, he wasn't a service member. I stand corrected, but he was a journalist in a war zone.
That's right. His story was amazing.
Yeah, Dean Yates.
That's
right. I stand corrected, sorry. Yes, but he had this, two of his journalists were killed, and it became this morally injurious event for him because he couldn't prevent it. So with chaplaincy and therapy, he went through an act of forgiveness and repair, and they had a service. He went through a service, wrote a poem. So there was a real way of him seeking forgiveness for self and the guilt that he had around that event, and was able to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well,
that's that adaptive disclosure.
yeah. And just on Dean Yates, I haven't got it, but I did take a photo of the slide at the conference that he put up in relation to his book. So, because everyone was talking about this book, so for those of you that may be interested, the book is called "Line in the Sand" by Dean Yates, and a life-changing journey through a body and life-changing journey through a body and mind after trauma. So,
Yeah.
and pretty good reviews for that book. So, that will be on the shopping list at some point. But it's
It's a good example too that whilst there was a large military component and a lot of research is directed towards moral injury in military veterans and first responders, it also goes to show that you don't have to be a military or first responder person to experience a moral injury event, because as we know, it happens a lot in the workplace.
well, yeah, and that's a big talking point at the moment. Will for a lot of workplaces is psychosocial risk hazards and psychosocial risk management. Like I know a lot of. Like I've actually got one coming up where I'm doing a laughter clinic for an organisation in a couple of weeks, and they basically sent me all of the PDFs and slides for their psychosocial risk hazard management within the organisation, and they just went, "Here's a heap of stuff to make sure that you align with all of our values and all that sort of gear." So, and if anyone's listening that goes psychosocial, we're talking about risks that are to you as a result of you performing your job. In relation to whether you have minimal control over your job. It can happen if you're feeling as though you don't get any recognition for doing good work. If there's a change within the organisation, if that change is managed incorrectly, that can be hard. Big one is low quality of relationships in the workplace is a big one. Harassment, that lack of support from your leadership. There's so many things that come into psychosocial risk. And, we live in Australia where how many of our population work outside of the cities, so even just living and working in a remote environment. We've got the fly in, fly out workforce here in Australia, which is huge. And some towns have got the didos, the drive in, drive out guys. And so psychosocial risk hazards and moral injury. It's interesting that we saw those two be put together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's when I look at the difference of veterans and first responders that I work with, and that often that overlap of being diagnosed and experiencing post-traumatic stress, and having them, if they have the moral injury of the organization, especially when there's medical retirement, which happened to me leaving the Air Force after 14 years, is that especially if it's forced medical retirement, or you thought you were going to be in an organization for a long period of time, or even acts of doing your day-to-day role, and say you've taken a life in service in the act of doing your role, and then you're judged as a criminal in your role, and then the organization is not there offering support, doesn't have your back. A recent Victorian police officer, she said that at the end of every shift, it was always a focus on what you did wrong, never on what you did right. And
Mm,
wow.
yeah.
If you ever had a debrief, it was about, let's talk about what you did wrong here,
Mm,
not the amount of, like, she saved lives.
yeah.
It was never about that. It was, well, what did you do wrong there? And
Mm,
imagine hearing that constantly. What did you do wrong? And if you do something wrong, we don't have your back. We're going to put you through the ringer or medically retire you.
mm.
That's
Well, yeah,
the
and
yeah.
not only that, like, there'd be people listening that don't work in the emergency services or the first responder space or the defence that can relate to that in their own work life. Like they have that sense of the boss is always handing them about what they're not getting right as opposed to rewarding what they are getting right and that sort of stuff. But to have that in an organisation where people that are drawn to that job, it takes a special kind of person to decide that they want to be a first responder, a paramedic, a police officer, a fiery. And so, you're giving so much of yourself emotionally to the job, to do the job,
Yeah. And to
because
not be
I can guarantee you
supported.
nobody enters the emergency services for the money.
No, that's right. And so many often they're there because they want to be in the helping
Yeah.
profession, and then to not receive that from the organization, and then work cover is a whole other story of how they're treated through the work cover. And I remember one of the slides where I think it was a psychiatrist, and he said that until moral injury and post-traumatic stress can often not move forward in recovery until the work cover experience is over, is done, and that can take years for some members.
Yeah, right.
And also looking at so in the civilian space of if you've been made redundant or if you've quit a job that you thought you were going to be there for a long period of time, it would say it was your dream job, you enjoyed the work, but the organization was against you, or there's internal bullying or poor systems in
Mm,
the organization that don't ensure your psychosocial safety.
mm,
Uh, that's that's something that can really impact and lead to depression, suicidality,
mm.
leaving any role. It doesn't have to be, like you said, it doesn't have to be military first responders. It can be any line
Mm.
of work, really.
Yeah. Just sitting on the treatment bit,
Mm.
like you're sitting in that space for a bit on what we experienced at the conference. There were a couple of things that I thought really interesting. One was how there's evidence to show that treating moral injury reduced symptoms of PTSD, which I thought was an interesting, the way those two interlock, which didn't surprise me, to be honest, but it was nice to see that there's actually evidence to show that. And, obviously being a new field of study, it's very multidisciplinary. There you go, multidisciplinary approach.
We're good with our words today.
Yeah, we're getting it around to treatment, and I was really encouraged by how many speakers talked about non-clinical treatment and non-clinical approaches to treatment,
Yeah.
and especially the importance of social connection in relation to treatment protocols as well. That really gave me hope, Jodi.
Yeah, definitely. And especially when one of the hallmark features of moral injury is that, and post-traumatic stress as well, is that social withdrawal.
Mm,
And that's a big one. So they were really encouraging things like social connectedness,
yeah.
which we know is so important, and like somatic somatic therapy, so body-based. Because I remember in one of the slides, one of the speakers was talking about how we carry so much trauma and moral injury can feel like a threatening event. So we hold it in our physical body, which for me, as a yoga, trauma-informed yoga teacher, it's very much about connecting back to the body, releasing tension, releasing the physical embodiment that we're carrying with our trauma. So it was really great to see that there, and things like mindfulness, being in the present moment, because especially with moral injury, we're going back to that moral injurious event.
Mm.
And I see a lot of it in this space of that they'll say a feeling of stuckness. I feel stuck. So they're
Mm.
stuck in the past. They're stuck in the physical feelings of, say, fear and anxiety with post-traumatic stress. With moral injury, it is that um, possible anger, resentment, guilt, shame, holding on to that and
Mm.
being stuck in the past is such a big barrier to be able to move forward and live a valued, meaningful life. So
Mm.
it was great to see, um, uh, yeah, a lot of reference to that, like yoga, the relaxation training, and mindfulness.
And just in relation to the secular treatments that they were talking about, aside from the spiritual aspects of it, um, so I remember there being I've got it here, a slide where they mentioned about 8 different types of treatments. So adaptive disclosure, which you mentioned before.
Yeah.
Now, in this list of others, are these ones that, excuse me, you come across when you're doing your Masters of Counselling? So acceptance and commitment therapy?
Yep, I'm trained in that. So that's very mindfulness based. It's a new wave therapy that's branched off from cognitive behavioral therapy, which has been an evidence-based therapy for post-traumatic stress, anxiety, depression for a long period of time. And
Yeah.
it's very much about present moment awareness and taking actions. What small actions can you take
Mm.
based on your values to be
Mm.
in the present moment and to be able to live a meaningful life? I really find it. There's lots of great practical tools in ACT. So we do talk a lot about that especially in the master's program.
Okay, so right, so that acceptance and commitment therapy, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? And a lot of talk around cognitive behavioral therapy in relation to treatments as well, and this is something that I have personal experience in from a patient's point of view. I've numerous psychologists over the years have talked to me about cognitive behavioral therapy and all that sort of stuff, but there's a lot of talk around. A lot of people would have heard the term, but, for those that may be listening that might go, well, I've always heard CBT and I don't really know what it is. Give us Jodi Allen, you're well qualified to give us a CBT for dummies.
Yeah, sure. Well, so CBT has been around for a long time now, cognitive behavioral therapy. And really, its main focus is around like our brain has a negativity bias. So it looks at our cognitive distortions, as we call them. So our thoughts,
Mm.
how they relate to our behaviors. So we're looking at in CBT, we challenge those cognitive distortions, those thoughts, those negative spirals that we can get into, those negative thought patterns like ruminating. So we
Mm-hmm.
can get stuck on things in the past or self-criticism, self-judgment. We're looking at those negative thoughts and how they influence our behavior, our thought patterns. So it could be how reactive we are. So if I'm I'm feeling threatened right now. I react in anger.
Well,
So
that was a big one for me. Was in relation to having it explained to me that taking that moment to realise that I've got a choice on how I react to this situation. You know, in the past, when this has happened, when X, Y, Z has happened, I've always reacted in this way, and realising that it's kind of breaking that automatic cycle, isn't it? And stopping
yeah,
and going, I've got a choice here on how I react to this.
yes. And we bring in certain tools because the key thing is in CBT is we're bringing an awareness. So the awareness, the pause, and then a different action, a different behavior that is more adaptive and more in a positive moving forward. Because I can't even imagine you now being reactive. So clearly it did work for you.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Absolutely. You know, still a work in progress. You know, like
we all are.
we all are, right?
As we should be.
Yeah, that's right.
We're all a work in progress, my
Yeah. Yeah.
friend.
Hey, so talk to me. Another one on the list here of the secular treatments for the moral injury they've got down is cognitive processing therapy. So I'm not familiar with what's the difference between cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive processing therapy?
To be honest, part of my I have written a couple of notes around it here because it's not something that I'm trained in
Right.
or I'm particularly aware of, or something that we've really covered in my master's. And I'm at the pointy end, right at the end of my master's at the moment. But when I did look it up, it is around psychoeducation and helping to identify and challenge unhelpful stuck points.
Hmm.
So I think like CBT is unhelpful thoughts. This seems to be stuck points. So it's probably, yeah, I don't want to speak too much about it because I don't know too much about it. But it was mentioned a few times at the conference as a modality. So
Cognitive processing therapy, and then the three that they've got underneath that are prolonged exposure, healing through forgiveness, and Stoic philosophy as well, which I thought was pretty interesting as well.
yeah, and I think it's when looking at treatments, it may be, EMDR was mentioned, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which
Well
is
played, well done. Look at you go. Good job, good job.
which has been
How long
shown
have
to
you been
be
waiting to get that out?
nailed it.
Yeah.
But that has been it's been widely accepted now as a very helpful therapeutic tool. For some people, they'll go through regular EMDR sessions, and it really helps to lessen the intensity of perhaps traumatic memories
Hmm.
uh, or things or that moral injurious event. It's not about getting rid of it, it's not about suppressing it, but all of these modalities and EMDR are looking at lessening the intensity of the trauma or the event so you can be in the present moment and live a valued life.
Hmm.
So it may be a combination. You might need some CBT, a little bit of ACT, and some EMDR. And that is something that if you have a good psychologist, therapist, they'll actually and it's about timing as well. Often a
Hmm.
psychologist will work with you or a counselor will work with you for a certain period of time and then they'll go, okay, I think we're ready to move into EMDR now. So it's not always beneficial to just jump into some of these therapies if we haven't had some time to make some connections as to what's really going on
Hmm.
from
I know also there were times where in my own treatment journey, there was a lot of time where some of these behavioural therapy modalities they said we've kind of got to get your medications under control before we can actually start to explore these type of therapies, because until such time as we've got the pharmacological side of your treatment right, you're not going to be in a place to actually use these. And I think I do.
That's good advice.
I've been very lucky over the years that the mental health team that I've had for a long time now has really focused on, understanding the process, going, well, for you to get the most out of, the cognitive behavioural therapy treatments and this sort of stuff, you really need to have, you need to have the biological capacity to be able to take this on.
And there was, and that's so true. And there was just a lot of discussion over the conference too about the holistic treatment of moral injury. And even one of the slides had exercise, nutrition, sleep. So all the lifestyle factors that
lifestyle medicine, ladies and gentlemen.
Lifestyle medicine. But we know that like the pillars of health. So if we haven't dialed in sleep, if we're not eating well, if we're not moving, it is going to, you can have, therapy is great, but if we're also not bringing in all of these other foundations, it is going to make recovery, because we can recover, we can move forward from whatever has happened to us, but it is a multi-modality, bringing all these foundational pillars in to be able to move forward.
Yeah. So let's move on to, well, actually, it's kind of circling back to something that we were talking about before, which I found really interesting at the conference, was the amount of workplaces that it was referring to outside of the emergency services and the defence, like moral injury in teaching was a big seminar that I really enjoyed. I can't remember if you were sitting in with me on that one. That was so interesting, and I've actually got a slide here that says teachers make daily ethical decisions about care, justice, responsibility, and harm. It's the constant feeling that no matter what I do, I'm letting someone down.
Interesting. Also, the moral quandary of my oldest is studying a Bachelor of Teaching in primary school, and working in a school where they can see that some of the kids are not being fed. They're coming to school without lunch. And there's that, well, here's some of my food, or let's go and make you a sandwich. That can be really challenging to your own values of caring for your students. And I can imagine that.
Well, that's what this lady was saying is, like knowing that you're sending kids home when they're in a situation where they might not,
cared for, be safe.
And it's only so much you can do, you know what I mean? And it talked about here how moral injury is produced in teaching: betrayal, professional trust is eroded when harm is raised but not addressed. Institutional silence replaces care, which is a big thing as well. Ethical conflict is overridden by mandated compliances, and systemic pressure where conditions normalise compromise and constrain choice. It was so interesting. The different occupations. Teaching was a big one. There was one about nursing, moral injury
Nurses,
in
yeah.
nursing is a big one as well.
Researchers,
Wasn't that it? Wasn't
yeah.
that
I would,
that presentation really floored me? That one.
yeah, the researching. So the researchers interviewing people and the vicarious trauma of listening to, like often researchers not have a mental health background or any training in how to carry these conversations and what they do with them. So
Mm.
I found that interesting. And whistleblowers,
Yeah,
moral injury and
yeah,
whistleblowers.
whistleblowers.
That was, it makes so much sense because I've worked with some police members who have been whistleblowers, and they don't so much have meet the criteria for post-traumatic stress, but they're coming on our PTSD program. A large part of their issues is this moral injury of they've whistleblowers and they're
Mm.
not having the support of the organization, the community, the media. Um, yeah, same with doctors, social workers, the inability to save a life, paramedics.
Oh, the paramedics talking about like regional paramedics when
Re-
they're out in the middle of, they're Australia's a big country, we've got people that are paramedics in the middle of nowhere and what was I remember the title of
what
the,
if I
if I don't go, no one, if I don't go, who will, or
if I don't
something
go,
like
who
that.
will? Yeah, so they can be uh, chronically fatigued, knowing that they should sleep deprivation, knowing that they shouldn't be going to an incident.
Or going to an incident where if they're in a rural community, they're
They
gonna
know.
know the people.
Yeah. And we also see it really hard too when people retire or medically retire from the job in a community where they served. And it can be really difficult. You're walking down the street. Have I arrested someone here? Or did I not save I wasn't able to save that child's life. It's like the inability to switch off in the community, even if they're not working in that role anymore. These things are carried with them. So,
Mm.
yeah, it's so far reaching. And of course, we are looking at moral injury on the spectrum. It is on that enduring, lasting, and when we talk about the moral injury.
Mm. Well, it's funny you say that because there was talk, I don't know if you recall, at the conference where they were, a lot of the conversation around definition and
Mm.
getting it in the DSM and that sort of stuff. And there was talk about it actually becoming a spectrum.
Yes,
I don't know if you recall that.
I do recall that. And there was a couple of speakers mentioning that it's on a continuum. And the
Mm.
Phoenix research did mention that as well, that they believe it should be on a continuum. And it makes sense to me because, as I was saying, when we very first started this chat, is that most of us are going to, in our lifetime, experience a morally distressing event
Mm.
in our lives, but we're talking about the moral injury, the long lasting impacts of and how it is impacting our life, our health, our mental health, our relationships.
Mm.
That's what we're focusing on with treatment, identifying where we a person sits on that continuum.
Yeah.
Then they absolutely, if there's moral injury identified, how do we identify it around the questions on a scale? And then how
Mm.
are we going to treat that? Because as you were saying, if we don't treat the moral injury and we don't help someone overcome this, then that's the feeling of stuckness.
Mm.
And it's very hard to move forward if we're carrying this moral injury. around
Mm.
with us. It's a heavy weight. It's like a burden,
Mm.
like a
Yeah,
heavy backpack.
I was just on that. I was encouraged at the fact that there was mention of the or reference to the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran
Mm.
Suicide, but there was only really one. Because they have concurrent sessions, so I don't. There was a lot of sessions that I didn't get to see because you got to make a choice. You got 5 sessions on off, and
That
you've
was
got to
so
choose one.
hard, wasn't
It's the modern day.
it?
It's the modern day conference now, isn't it? That's one thing that I find. Like it's great that they give you, and it seems to be the way these type of conferences are going. Is you've got your main plenary speakers that everybody gets to listen to, and then
Yeah,
you have your breakout sessions, your concurrent sessions where they might have 4 or 5 different speakers on offer all at the same time talking about different things,
yeah.
which is great to give you choice, but at the same time there was I'm sure I said to you that there were a couple of times where I was like, well, I'm going to this, but I really wanted to see that and that as well.
Yeah, I was the same. I wanted to listen to all of them,
Mm.
but I guess it'd be a much longer
Yeah.
conference, longer than 2 days.
So,
Yeah.
where I'm going with this, I only saw one presentation that referenced the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide that we had in Australia, and it was interesting that they, I can't remember who it was now, but they were talking about administrative violence.
Mm.
Witness accounts reveal a range of coercive and unjust administrative measures, unnecessary and petty tasks, blocked leave or career opportunities, arbitrary separations and discharges, weaponised military injustice. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty full on stuff, isn't
Oh
it?
yeah, there's a lot there, and yeah, we see it in the veteran community. So much moral injury is carried for very wide-ranging reasons
Mm.
too. Mm.
Okay, so let's start to bring it home because there's a few things that I want to talk about as we wind it up.
Yeah.
It was great to see, like you said right at the start, to see that combination of clinicians and researchers come together, and it's interesting that similar to my experience of the Suicide Prevention Australia, the National Suicide Prevention Conference recently that I went to, is a lot of people swimming around different parts of the same ocean. And I think as moral injury awareness continues to grow, both here in Australia and internationally, that will increase. It was I'm encouraged by a sense of collaboration. They're talking about coming together to create this definition for the DSM, coming together to create, the spectrum of diagnosis or the treatment protocols and all that sort of stuff, because it's going to take. It's going to take a collective effort to move forward in the treatment and
Yeah.
and the diagnosis and manage, not only diagnosis and management, but the um, the reducing harm to start with. Me, I'm all about early intervention.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that was talked about at the conference, in relation to, but it kind of all came under the psychosocial risk kind of banner,
Yeah.
and I think as we move forward, it's going to be interesting to see where we sit in the early intervention phase.
Yeah. And I think they're great conversations to have and great research, because what it is going to do is hold organizations more accountable
Mm,
and have a look at their systems and processes for taking care of their people within, while they're in an organization, and
mm,
how they are treated post.
mm,
So it's hopefully, the more and more awareness there is around it, the more that we can identify it, and the more that it is brought to the awareness of, like I said, these organizations. One of the speakers, remember, it was the chaplain that said about, the moral injury. He said the funny, you might remember it better than me, but he's like, stop being the cause of it. Do you remember what?
Oh,
Quite funny.
no, what was it? Was that the from the police where he was talking about? Oh no,
No,
he mentioned something else.
no, it was really funny. He was, talking to an organization, and he was, basically said, stop
Oh,
being,
stop trying to reduce moral injury or just stop being the cause of it or
stop being the
something.
cause of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like here you are trying to talk about what it is and how to, prevent it and all that kind of stuff, but they're actually the cause of it.
The behavior.
Nine
Yeah.
times out of 10. So, yeah, I think we're on a really great trajectory with the research and the discussions and the people that are really invested, like Nikki and Moral Injury Australia.
The work Nikki does is pretty impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, and having that lived experience for her and making such a wave in the area of moral injury and understanding it. I think we're heading towards being able to prevent it
Mm.
and also being able to treat it so people can move forward and live a valued life, which is what it's all about.
Mm. Yeah, it's Nikki Jameson. For those of you who don't know, like I said, if you haven't already listened to her podcast episode that we did at the end of last year, get on board. It's fantastic. And I think her slides, I must have taken photos of pretty much every one of the slides that she brought
Yeah,
up.
me too. Yeah.
And there's a couple here that I want to chat about. She's got one, the hidden wounds of service, whether it be military, healthcare, doctors, nurses, social workers, police, fire, paramedics, and then towards moral repair. Her SLAM analogy, support, listen, ask model, the support, listen, and ask model. But I just want to leave, our listeners before we do wind it up, because I really got a lot out of that conference. It was a big financial commitment to go down there and do that.
Nearly everyone was self-funded.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. So it was definitely worth it. Yeah. Would I go again next year? Probably, if I'm around. I don't know if I'm going to be available when it's on. So for those of you that are interested, the next Moral Injury Conference will be in Hobart next year. They've got a Tasmania thing going on, which is, I don't know what that's all about, but they just love Tassie. God, it's a beautiful place, right?
We were hoping it was New Zealand, weren't we?
Yeah. So it's in Hobart next year on the 1st and 2nd of June 2027. So in actual fact, I shouldn't stop saying if. A mate of mine said, stop saying if you get your Churchill Fellowship. It keeps saying, you got to say when, mate. You got to say
Put it
when,
out there.
right?
You get it. That's
so
right.
I may be overseas doing that, because I originally thought I'd go and do my trip in the early part of the year, but I don't want to go to the States, Canada and the UK when they're coming out of their winter. I kind of go over there when it's, make the most of it. I want people to be around. So if I'm around, I'd go next year. Would you go?
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to see. I think we'll spend less time on what moral injury is, and it'll be interesting to see in 12 months where we have gone, what progress has been made,
I reckon in the next 12 months, the big focus, like next year, at the conference, I reckon we'd see a lot of lot of talk around the definition, how it's been defined and put into the DSM. I think
Yeah.
there seemed to be a big focus on that, and that's what they were saying is all the greatest people in the world that have focused on moral injury are in this room right now. That was because that conference was the first of its kind.
Yeah.
And so I like the way at the end the guy said, "Why don't we just lock the doors, right, and just come up with."
Oh, that's right.
Come up with a definition, a spectrum, a treatment protocol, because we've got everybody that's going to have a say in making this happen in the room right now, which I thought was very cool. So I reckon there'll be a focus on that next year, and treatments, organisational, how organisations have started to look at, because I know myself, I do a mental health presentation for workplaces where I talk about psychosocial risk factors and psychosocial risk mitigation, harm reduction, and moral injury hasn't been something that I've included in that presentation, but I will now, looking at how that fits in, because it dovetails quite nicely. What are your thoughts on, and because you're better qualified than me to talk about this, what are your thoughts on the voice of hearing from the voice of lived experience with people with moral injury and PTSD? Because I know the voice of lived experiences has been a big thing in the suicide prevention sector.
Yeah, I think it's just as it is in the suicide prevention sector, because we know that moral injury does lead to suicide, suicidal ideation. The more that we hear of lived experience, which we did have a couple of lived experience speakers at the conference, and the conversations I've had with ex-serving commando the following day, and he's like, tell me more. And he told me about his what he thought about moral injury, which was fascinating, and connecting with a group of veterans 2 days after that I used to work with in Tasmania, what all their thoughts about the meaning of moral injury. I think so many of them can resonate with it and have their own story. So the more that we hear from lived experience, the more we can connect, and people can have an aha moment of, oh, I've experienced that. I would not have thought that was something that's contributing to how I feel right now. So, and it can be a real aha moment when I discuss it, because there is more knowledge around post-traumatic stress and PTSD diagnosis at the moment than there is moral injury. And so it's a very interesting conversation to have right now, and then to hear of my friends and people that I've worked with, what their experience of it and what their thoughts are around it. Really interesting conversations.
So do you think there's a different challenge for us to hear from people with lived experience in relation to moral injury because of the okay, so let's talk about stigma quickly, right? So you've got organisational stigma and structural stigma and self-stigma. Do you think it's harder for us to hear from voices of lived experience with moral injury because of the organisational stigma attached to it? Like the betrayal, the sense of betrayal, and, because they might become like they might fall under that whistleblower category. And it's like one of the guys was talking about, people love and champion the whistleblower. They just don't employ them.
Oh, I remember that statement. Yes. Yeah. I think it is.
You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, definitely. Because remember, we were talking about this before we started recording about we have different values. And there was even a speaker talking about, is it moral injury or perceived injustice? So for one person, it might be this is deeply against my values and what is right. For
Yeah.
another person, it's like, oh yeah, well, absolutely we should do that. Or that makes sense to me. That means something to me. Why would that why are you stuck in that? Why is that an an issue for you?
Mm,
So it is, it can be a little bit of murky waters, and I can imagine it does take a courageous person to step up and have a lived experience of moral injury because they could be speaking to people in the room and go, well, like the stigma around it, this is what you signed up for.
mm,
That's part of your job.
yeah.
But, why is it an issue for you?
Mm,
When something goes against our core values, our sense of right and wrong, and or a sense of how we've been treated in an organization, it is deeply personal. So I think, yeah, the lived experience space, as we know for mental health, is really important because this is how we connect and people um, connect with each other and get a greater understanding of what the experience is.
yeah.
But yeah, it is a little, like I said, it is a little bit of murky waters because what is important value to one person may not be so much for another.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
100%.
yeah, and it can and our values change over time.
Mm,
And yeah, one of the commandos was saying to me that immediately post service, there's that bravado, there's that, you're with your mates and you got a bit of bravado around working together, being on deployment together. And then he said in the following 6 to 8 years, when you become a civilian, and he said the guys start to soften, there's less bravado, and he said that's where his some of his traumatic memories pop up that
right.
were never an issue when he immediately left multiple deployments. He
Isn't
was
that
like,
interesting?
yeah, it was because I said I've just been to the moral injury conference, and he said, "Tell me more." And it was so good. We talked for about an hour about his thoughts around it and being still heavily ingrained in the commando community. He's seen the change of the guys over the years of how they feel about their service, how they feel about what they've done
Mm,
as they become parents, as
yeah.
they
Right.
become civilians. And that was one of the research, one of that New Zealand Army guy that did his PhD on how our morals and values change while we're serving as a veteran and compared to a civilian. And it was a really interesting study um, of what they perceived was justifying like killing someone, how they felt about it in different stages. And yeah, this friend of mine, it changes over time.
Mm, yeah.
So that
Wow.
was a really interesting. So there's, yeah, I
It's hard
think
to
the more
imagine
we
for
talk
those of
about,
us that like for those of us that have never experienced the military or military life or the life of a first responder. It's, for just the average person walking down, it's hard to comprehend that type of thing to be carrying around with you.
yes, yeah, it is. It's like, I use the analogy, it's like walking around with a heavy backpack. And
Mm,
then you've got the stress, the chronic stress of daily life, as well as if you've got trauma, the moral injury, you've got all that filling in this, you're carrying this heavy weight. And you can see it in people too, in the way they embody it, the way they are carrying it. And that's why I love um, those foundational pillars, bringing in those somatic things and um, what are our thoughts around it and that as well, and helping to recover, because we can recover. And yeah.
Yeah, I
And
reckon
we're
next year will be really interesting to see where the field has gone in the next 12
yeah,
months. I reckon it really will.
it will be interesting. It's an interesting ride that we're on.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so going back to our friend Nikki Jameson, I just want to leave our listeners, and once again, always appreciate you tuning in if you've stuck with us for the journey, with some practical tools and strategies. And this is courtesy of Nikki, and in relation to, she brought up a slide which I definitely want to highlight here, stating what you can start on today. And I will put in the show notes a link to Nikki's brand new website. She's all excited because I know how much of a journey it is.
Oh, it's been years in the making, hasn't it?
Oh, well, it is. It's, I know the laughter clinic. Well, I procrastinated on that for 3 years before I actually got the
trauma from that website.
Oh, I don't even want to talk about it. So yes, I will put a link in the show notes to the Moral Injury Australia website, which is up now. So we've got 2 columns here. We're talking immediate actions and cultural changes. And just basically, we're talking about workplaces. This isn't something that is wholly and solely focused on first responders and defence. We're talking about across the workplace here. So immediate actions, number one, ask your staff what they need. It seems so simple, isn't it? And it's like, with all of that, we're talking in suicide prevention and mental health, a lot of the time it is just sitting with someone and going to where they're at and going, what is it that you need right now? Because people know, or they might go, I don't know what I need right now. And that's okay. But, you will. What do you feel like you need right now? What sort of support? What does support look like for you right now?
Yeah, such an important question.
Yeah. Run consultations and forums. We're talking about in the workplace. We're talking about identify moral hazards in your workplace. Start thinking about risk mitigation strategies. Provide moral injury education and training, and create peer support networks. All good stuff. So that's immediate actions. Now let's talk about the cultural changes. Build an open culture regarding mental health discussions. Do you think workplaces they've got to be getting better at it now, surely?
Oh, well, you would hope so, but I think there's still a stigma and fear around voicing, people standing up for themselves, or voicing or having it encouraged in a workplace. I think we've still got some ways to go there.
Yep.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
So the psychosocial safety now being embedded in legislation is a really good start.
Yeah, I know my good mate Stephen Woods, who runs Employee Wellness Australia, he does a lot of leadership training and training for emerging leaders and all that sort of stuff, and he's big on creating a culture that around mental health awareness in the workplace, because he knows, like we talk about return on investment analysis, and it's one of those things that, as much as I hate to make it about money, a lot of the time it is about money, and the fact that, there's been research done to show that, investing on the mental health of your workforce, your return on investment can be 3 to 5-fold.
Yeah. Well, less sick days, better work performance.
Well, absenteeism and presenteeism, I didn't even realise this thing about presenteeism until a few years ago, where, we've got people showing up for work and not being productive because they're struggling.
Yeah.
It's a real thing, you know. Increased going back to cultural changes in the organisation, increased transparency and accountability. That's a top-down thing, you know. Like you've got to have the leaders have got to really buy in on this to bring that cultural change through.
Oh, yeah.
Build compassion and empathy, ensure support access is clear. You know, I know a lot of organisations now have EAPs.
Yeah.
You know, employee assistance programs, and it's been interesting. My mate, come back to Stephen Woods from Employee Wellness Australia again, talking about how many organisations have EAPs that don't get utilised as much as what they should.
Yeah.
You know,
and is that around, is that stigma, or is it the lack of knowledge that there is even an EAP in the workplace? Are they informed, or do they know how to access it?
yeah, well, that's it. It's all about education in that respect, and I don't know about the stigma, because the whole idea of an EAP is it's 100% anonymous, you know. So if there is that stigma attached to stop you as a barrier to entry to using it, it could be that self-stigma that you put on yourself going, oh, I don't need that or whatever. But the people that I've spoken to that have engaged the EAP in their workplace have been very grateful for the fact that it's been there.
Yeah.
And a lot of places will extend that EAP to immediate family members as well, which I think is fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, that's great.
And one of the last thing on the cultural change is encourage self-care.
Oh, we love a bit of self-care.
Hey, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Hey?
Talking to a psychologist at the conference, and I said, "Is self-care in your studies?" And he was like, "Yeah, we talk about it, but we don't practice it."
Yeah, the mechanic whose car's fallen apart, and the plumber whose house is leaking.
Oh, geez.
Nice. Well, I'm really glad that I got to experience. I'm glad that we did that conference. You know, it was nice to have it was really nice to have a familiar face there, I will say, because I didn't know anybody. Well, actually, it turned out that I did know a couple of people there, but
I was surprised at who I knew there, actually. So
out of the 300 people, it was I think there was probably maybe be lucky if there was half a dozen people that I knew there.
Yeah.
But I came away knowing a lot more people than I went there knowing, because, you know, I'm a networker.
Right. We made some friends.
Hey, yeah, I'm a networker.
You are. You're very good at networking.
Hey, yeah.
I tend to hide. I'm hopeless.
Yeah, and then I go, have you met my friend Jodi Allen? And then you come out of your shell.
I know, I can hear Jodi.
yeah. Then you come out of your shell. That's cool. Well, I'm really glad we got to do this, and for those of you that are listening, like I said, we'll put some links in the show notes for the Moral Injury Australia website. Conference next year, the Australian New Zealand Moral Injury Conference, will be on the 1st to the 2nd of June 2027 in Hobart, beautiful Hobart. Watch this space when it comes to the field of moral injury, diagnosis, treatment and prevention, obviously. So,
yeah. And start, maybe have a conversation if this has been interesting to you and something that you haven't heard of before, and you think it might be relevant to a friend, a colleague, a family member, share it, because the more that we get that awareness out there and the more that people can perhaps identify it within themselves, then they know where to start, where to go, and maybe get some help.
Yep.
Because it's there.
Yeah, 100% it's there. Yeah. Wise words from Jodi Allen. Okay, my friends. So, like I said, wherever you're listening in the world, thank you very much for tuning in. And if you haven't already done so, hit the follow button, subscribe, all that sort of jazz. Leave a comment. I'd like to hear from you, and share this content, as Jodi said. Share this content with anyone who you feel as though may benefit from this material. Got a couple of interesting guests coming up. A comedian mate of mine, David Smeet. We're going to be chatting in a week or so, hoping to get Jeff from Buddy Up and Craig from
Jeff McLean, Craig Henslow is amazing.
So hopefully to try and get those guys on board sometime soon. And I've got a few comedians lined up that are like, when's it my turn? like, we'll get there. And
you're so special.
Yeah. Next. And I actually I will be trying to get a Pulse episode out sometime in the next week or so, because it's been probably a month or so since I've had a deep dive into the world of what's been happening around the world in relation to mental health.
Hot topics, I'm sure.
Hot topics in relation to mental health, suicide prevention, and the health and the research around humour and laughter. So look out for that episode, a Pulse episode coming up sometime next week, I would say. So there you go. Thank you very much, Jodi Allen. As always, pleasure hanging out with you, and thank you very much for your insights, and it was great experiencing that conference together, and it's really interesting to see where it goes from here, isn't it?
Yeah, and I appreciate you, all the work that you do in this space, and the great chats that we have. And there's lots more to come.
Lots more to come. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. All right, thanks for tuning in, Jodi Allen. We'll talk to you next time. Cheers.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, look after yourself, my friends, and look after those around you. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. The information contained in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended, nor should it ever replace, advice received from a physician or mental health professional. Want more info? Visit thelaughterclinic.com.au. If you enjoyed the episode, please share and subscribe. Thanks again for listening to A Laughter Clinic podcast with your host, Mark McConville.